So, welcome everybody to another episode of TNT. We are going to discuss today top 5 suspension questions. This was hard to narrow down. There's like a million questions, but we're going to try to focus on a few things that a lot of our customers ask us. Um, Most people, when they think of TNT suspension, do not think of entry level.
It's because it's not.
Right. We're
You want entry level, there's lots of that out there.
right. We are definitely the next level and the next level and however many levels you want to go type of suspension. So we got a couple people on here. We are going to start with question number 1 that gets asked all the time. Do I need a long arm or not?
Yes.
If you're just a mall crawler,
Next question.
probably not.
Answer is yes. Next question.
Okay, Bob, you got to at least give a 1 or 2 benefits of
Well,
having a long arm.
it depends on what you're doing with the Jeep.
Obviously. But when they're asking that
Start
question,
with a Gladiator, right? No need for a long arm. Zero. Absolutely no reason. Because I just finally got my suspension dialed where I like it and want it. And it is about a net 2.25-inch lift, 2.5. Depends on what I got in the Jeep. 37s fit all day long. So
do people take gladiators out rock crawling and all that other?
I don't know.
Yeah.
If they do, they're stupid.
Well,
but
I mean,
my
okay,
opinion.
yeah. So,
but no, it hasn't got anything to do with rock crawling a Gladiator. It's lift height.
Yes, because
that
you want the
deal,
long arm to
so
get
as
you back
you
around.
lift, long arms became popular or were invented, or however you want to say that, when Jeep in 1984 originally released the Cherokee with the first generation 5-link suspension, right? And their lower control arms, if memory serves, is 15.5-inch on center in a stock application. It's like that long, right? So as you lift it, this being the I'm looking at this, so I'm working in a mirror, so bear with me. This being the chassis, this being the axle, and that's probably about pretty close to the angle that a factory suspension's at. Well, now you put 4 inches of lift on it. I gotta think of which hand I gotta move. This one. So you put 4 inches of lift on it. Now see what happened to the ankle. Going the wrong way.
Just don't look at yourself.
Right, this angle.
The long arm
went from here, I'm too far apart, went from here to there, so you can see how steep that angle is. The other way to look at it's this way. Lower control arm, upper control arm. We're like this factory, this end being the chassis, this end being the axle, and now you lifted the Jeep, so the chassis went up, right? So now your control arm geometry is horrible. And, I mean, you're watching me do this on TV, but the thing you can't see is if you drew all the geometry out in the radiuses and the center lines and all of that fun stuff that us designer type and engineer types do, you took this from here, and as you lifted it, now I'm exaggerating that, but you can see what happened to the axle. So back in the day, the Cherokees were the first. And since Jeep already had that kind of tried and true starting in 84, the TJ came out in 97. Shouldn't do math in public, but that's what, 7 years later. They're like, screw it, it works on a Cherokee, it'll work on a TJ. So they didn't change anything. All the suspension parts on an XJ or a Grand Cherokee ZJ or a TJ, and then 04 and newer LJ, 04 to 06 LJ, they're all the same. Mix and match, swap stuff around. It's all the same parts. It's called mass production. Make one part and make millions of them. You can make them cheap.
But the benefit of the long arm.
I'm getting there.
I know, we got 5 more questions.
When you pull, the TJ was the most noticeable. They shipped out of the factory at 93.5-inch wheelbase. You put a 4-inch lift on a short arm TJ, you end up around 90.5 because of this, right? So that's problem number 2. So the long arm, we didn't invent it. We were close on the XJ. We were one of the first to have a really good working long arm on the front of an XJ. We adapted that to the TJ, had to make some length changes and mounting changes and whatnot to make it work, but the geometry works the same. So you went from here, now your pivot point is here and here. You can see the less of a radius that the front end works in as the suspension cycles. So you get less caster changes, which helps steering and drivability. You get to put the axle back where it was supposed to be, because the long arm is adjustable. And we took a 4-inch lifted TJ, disconnected everything, held the Jeep on the lift at 4 inches of height, set the axles down on the wheels and tires, and pushed the axles back out to 93.5 inches where they're supposed to be. Now the bump stops all line up. The shocks aren't doing stupid shit because the lower mount moved, and built the arm to fill the space. And then gave you adjustment to go even higher. So the taller you go, the smoother the ride gets. Well, smoother the ride gets versus short arm versus long arm. You're working in a bigger, it's simple geometry. You know, your short arm is this, long arm is that. And I know I'm not at the right angle at the camera for you to see that, but the radius changes. So everything works smoother. And you can get more articulation because of a short 4-link, which is it's a 5-link if you count the panhard rod, but the suspension, short 4-link, all tipped down like this, everything's all bound to hell. So as you try to articulate, it eats bushings, it bends control arms, all of that stuff.
Okay. And we can do, and we probably will do, a whole video by itself on long arms. Right now, we want to focus on top 5 questions. So we're going to make them a little shorter
You asked a
answers.
question, I gave you an
Right.
answer.
I get it. We're going to focus each one of these components. We're going to be another question down the road, right? But for right now, do I need a long arm? If you're
Yes.
going more than
If
4
you're going
inches,
more than 2 inches of
two-
lift,
2, 3, yep.
2 to 3,
Okay.
I would say yes, especially on the first generation link suspensions. JK and newer, the factory figured it out. They went from a 15.5-inch bolt center. JK goes out to, I'm working off the top of my head, I didn't have notes for this, 2021. And at JL, they went, longer was better on the JK. We should go longer yet on the JL.
So depends on the Jeep.
Right.
Depends on what you're doing. Okay. Question number 2. Coilovers versus coil spring versus coil shock. Now I know this
Versus
can be a
what?
coilover versus coil springs and shocks versus ORIs. I know this is a whole other long video, but
Well, I'll stop you right there. ORIs don't belong on a Jeep.
okay.
Period. They're too heavy. The Jeep is too heavy for an ORI. And I know if
They sell a bunch of them.
if we were more popular and had a bigger following, I'd be getting tore up in the comments. But world according to Bob, ORIs belong on tube cars, something light. They do not work on a heavy Jeep.
Like rock bouncers?
It ain't got nothing to do with rock bouncing.
No.
Light.
Okay.
Curb weight, trail weight,
Okay.
however you want to define that.
Okay.
If you want a generic number, 3,000 pounds and less. Anything over that, don't bother with an ORI.
Okay.
And I know I'll get tore up. I don't really care. That's my opinion.
World according to Bob.
I've proved it to myself. I've proved it to customers. They do not work. We put ORIs on Jeeps. The guys wheeled them, and a year later, we took that shit off and put coilovers on.
Okay.
So the difference between, so this is a dumb question according to me. The question should stop at coilover versus coil and shock.
Yep.
The difference between the two basically comes down to how thick is your wallet. In generic levels of discussion, on a rock crawler trail rig, you're not going to see the difference. You're really not. The advantage falls to coilover because they're tunable. You build the Jeep XYZ, and yep, that's all I ever want. And then you go wheeling, and your buddy shows up with PDQ, and you're like, shit. So you got to add that gizmo or that thing or an ARB fridge or whatever, and you start stacking weight on the Jeep. It is what it is with a coil spring. You either have to change the spring to a different manufacturer or a different lift height to get the Jeep to sit back where you want it. With a coilover, you can adjust it within reason. You know, people that'll run a coilover 6 inches down the thread don't have a clue what they're doing. It's totally wrong.
Do you think coilovers ride better than coils?
It depends. If you're in the budget basement or basement budget and you pick a coil spring, I don't know, we'll say Terraflex. They build decent springs, we use them. You put a Terraflex spring on and a Terraflex shock, you get this level of performance. And when I say performance, I'm talking at speed. Anything will work at 0.5 miles an hour crawling around on a trail, right? It doesn't freaking matter. Where the coilover starts to shine over top of a coil and a shock is at speed. Perfect example is Poison Spider, Mesa. Have you ever been to EJS or ever been to Moab and you're on Poison Spider Mesa? The trail really sucks. It really does. World according to Bob. There's like 4 name brand obstacles on it and then a whole bunch of bullshit in between the obstacles.
Day.
So you're over this washboard sand or them stupid little thin things up on top that you're across to get to the next obstacle. Well, now we have better built Jeeps, we shift back to high range and stand on it. Get to the next obstacle. Slow down, shift back to low range, do the thing, get back into high range, you're gone. If you're on a coil spring and shock, that's what you're doing all day. So at speed,
better than a leaf spring.
Exactly, Robert. A properly tuned coil over is light years ahead of a coil and a shock. But if all you're building is a trail Jeep, slow speed, you're just out for a nice day, you know, you can crawl a big waterfall, big rock, whatever, bounce around on a 2-track. They work great. We have Jeeps built that way. But,
I think Behind the Rocks was one of the
Behind the Rocks is another one that things are spread out and you get through, you know, I used to mix them up, high dive and up truck. Yeah, high dive goes down, up truck goes up. You get through there, the next section is like at low range first gear is like, you know, shift, go. You can do that with a coilover once you tune them. You know, you can play coilovers now to the average guy at home, probably not. But you can send them in. There's places you can send them. You can change the valving in them for more compression resistance, less compression resistance, more rebound, which is extending. So you can tune all of that. You can play with spring rates. You can do all kinds of stuff with a coilover. With a coil spring and shock, you're kind of stuck with what you got.
It is what it is.
Now, you can bridge the gap by spending more on a shock.
A good shock.
A good
really
shock.
Good shock.
And that's not the Instagram marketing bullshit. Just because it's got a remote reservoir on it, that's not a good shock. You know, I mean, it is, but not as I'm describing. A good shock is a 2 or 3 bypass. You put bypass shocks on with coil springs, and as long as the coil springs set your intended or wanted height, that's all the coil spring does, is it holds the Jeep up. Its only purpose is to hold the Jeep
give you a little cushion.
No, all it is to hold the Jeep here. The shock does all the work. The shock soaks up the bumps. The shock soaks up the or controls the rebound, all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So by going up to a 2 or 3 bypass shock, I got customers out there running standard issue coil springs. I think they were rock crawler. I don't know, whatever. It's a coil spring. We put Radflow triple bypasses on it, and he can run with me on my coilover, 2.5-inch internal bypassed coilovers on my JK. He uses a JK as well. He runs with me all day long. In some places, he probably outshines me a little bit because the triple bypass has more adjustment. There's ranges in a bypass shock. So think of it fully extended is 10 inches of travel, right? So from 10 to 6, you can adjust that range, and 6 to 0, you can adjust that range. And then over here on the third bypass is where you're adjusting the rebound. So you can set that 0 to 6 real squishy, and then you can turn the valving up on the 6 to 10 inch. So when you, oh shit, there's a water diversion. So you're compressing the suspension all the way. That last 4 inches of travel, you can turn that up. So then you package a set of air bumps with that. If you can, air bumps are tricky with coil springs, but if you can package in a set of air bumps with that, you run. But now you're at,
So,
money-wise, it was cheaper to put coilovers on it.
so coilovers versus coil springs, it's an individual
it depends on what
discussion
you're doing with the Jeep.
per vehicle.
Call me and we
Absolutely.
can discuss it for hours.
Okay. Question 3, flex joints versus rubber bushing versus Heim joints.
Well,
I know
this
the
is
answer.
another one of them 3-stage questions, and I'm going to throw one out right away.
I know.
Heim joints, junk.
I knew you were
There's
gonna
no
say
freaking
that.
reason to have a Heim joint in suspension
Any part
on
of
a
it.
Jeep,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
If you're building a buggy, whatever,
A
true
Razor,
dedicated rock crawling tube chassis buggy, that's what I mean by that. Put them in there, whatever. They suck in a Jeep because they're noisy. They're non-rebuildable when they wear out, and they do wear out. You throw them away and you buy a new one. With rebuildable, we'll call what she said flex joints. That's what we use. We'll dumb that down to a rebuildable joint versus a polyurethane or rubber bushing.
Yep.
Same with polyurethane rubber bushings. When they're shot, buy a new one. If they're polyurethane, they're usually in 2 pieces. You pull it out, throw them away, put the new ones in, put the arm back in the Jeep, and away you go. With rubber bushing, not so much. It usually needs a press.
Like the Clevite bushing,
Yeah, we use
the OEM ones.
OEM Clevite bushing in certain places in our suspension.
Those are used in a place that doesn't need
That doesn't really
any
move a whole lot.
movement. Right.
We're using
up
them
and
more
down.
so for road noise isolation, because flex joints are rigid, right? So you put a rigid bushing on both ends of a control arm, you're going to pick up road noise. If that's important to you, you want to look for control arms that have at least a rubber bushing in one end. Polyurethane will transmit noise too, because when they're new, they're fairly rigid.
Squeaky.
And they can squeak.
Yeah.
We use the flex joint because it's infinitely rebuildable.
Yep.
Simple.
Yep.
You need one tool available from us. We keep them in stock. When you put your order in, tell Mary or Tanner, hey, send me the tools too. They're cheap. But when you need them and ain't got them, doesn't matter how much they cost. You ain't got them.
Yeah.
So just order them with the kit, put them in your toolbox.
Yeah, David.
Exactly.
Squeak, squeak, squeak.
Heim joints are just noisy. There's no way around it. The other problem with a Heim joint is they have real limited shank. Even the big ones have limited shank. So you think you're building an adjustable suspension because you ordered a bunch of do-it-yourself parts, bungs and tube and Heim joints, and you're going to do all this stuff, and you're going to weld all this together, and you're going to make a control arm that's supposed to be 36 inches center to center, and you missed. And you end up 35 and a half. Oh, I'll just adjust it. Yep, you just blew machinist handbook thread engagement requirement because you only have that much thread to start with, and when you screw them out to get to that length you needed, it's going to fail because you only have a half a dozen threads holding it together. It's just going to fail. So measure twice, cut once if you're building your own arms with heim joints. Back in the day, we used to mock them up with PVC pipe because you screw that up, you throw it away, you get whack another 4-foot piece off the 20-foot stick, and you can whittle in so you know exactly what your tube length has to be. But it's more work than when it has to be.
So,
and they're just noisy. They squeak. And you throw them away. They're
well,
old military term. There might be a few of you old guys that understand that. They're XB3. That means they're throwaway. When they're broke, you just throw it away.
Right.
Get a new
Right.
one.
So wrap up flex joints versus rubber bushing versus heim joints.
It depends on the application.
Part of the reason we use flex joints is rebuildability,
Yep.
durability. You know, it's just going to
Buy
last
once,
a lot.
cry once.
Yeah, that's right. So question number 4, Y-link versus 3-link versus 4-link.
Depends on the application.
Once again, yes.
We chose way back when I started this whole mess in 2004. Actually, a little prior to that, I was putzing around in my garage. We chose to go what we call the Y-link. Most people call it a radius arm. One, ease of manufacture, although I complicated the shit out of that, and it's got bend and rotation and all this stuff, and it's really complicated to put together. But that's another discussion. We chose to go radius arm because we built all 3 on the same Jeep. We built a 3-link, we built a 4-link, there we go, 4, and then we built a radius arm. And we cycled, and we cycled, and we cycled, up and down. And we were doing this shit all on the floor with a floor jack. It really sucked. Run it all the way to bump, all the way to droop, all the way to bump, all the way to droop. Digital angle finders on certain pieces of the axle that was moving. And where we ran in, why we decided to stick to the radius arm style suspension, which then morphed into the Y-link, because then I wanted ground clearance and had to tuck things in to get them all the high clearance, because we wheel a lot in South Dakota, and anything that hangs down gets ripped off or smashed. So that's part of why the Y-link is so complicated. It's up in the chassis and then drops out at the last minute. But the basic, this pickup points doesn't matter if it's a straight line or a bent tube or whatever. The pickup points don't change. What we found with the radius arm design, in the intended usage of suspension travel, okay, we build Jeeps. We don't build buggies. You know, we build Jeeps that drive on the street. We build Jeeps that still look like Jeeps, right? In that intended usage of travel, we had less caster change with the radius arm design than we did with a 4-link or a 3-link. And the reason for that is you cannot, unless you're willing to cut a hole in your floor, and all the 3-link and 4-link fanboys are going to start commenting, but to get the geometry correct, that's number 1. The geometry's wrong, why bother? To get the geometry correct on a 3-link or a 4-link, because they both do the same thing to the caster, it's just whether you have one upper control and the whole works or you have 2, they cycle the same. They articulate a little different. A 3-link moves freer than a 4-link does. But to get that geometry right, the upper control arm mount on the chassis would have to be through the floor. You cannot get enough vertical separation following rule number 1, nothing hangs below the frame, to get ripped off. Now, you bring the lower down below the frame and you can start getting some of that vertical separation, but at what cost? Every time you put it in the big rocks, real rocks, not Holy Cross, sorry, I'm naming local trails. That's not a real rock trail. They take a stock Jeep up Holy Cross. Mm-hmm. Real rocks, like size of Volkswagen Bugs and microbuses and big rocks. they get ripped off. They stop you dead. You cannot go forward because you're bam. And if you do force your way over it, now you drop over it, you can't back up. So nothing hangs below the frame. That's rule number one. Within the premise of that rule, the radius arm works better. And then we tweaked and tweaked until we got it right. The Y-link arm comes straight out of that chassis mount, and then with the bend and the rotation drops down to the axle mount. So when you look at one of our TJs
Or
JK or XJ, you look at it and you go, well, the Jeep don't have any front control arms. What the hell's going on here? So look again. So you look this way around behind the back tire, and then you see that arm dropping down. When you look dead on from the side, nothing's there. And they slide over rocks, they go through stuff, they don't get hung up. So that was our main reason. And every Jeep's different. I know we've built a few 3-links. We just did one on Steve Winchell's CJ. It works great.
Yeah.
Mounts hang down below the frame. It's a CJ. There isn't a lot of room to work under there.
Okay. So, like we said earlier, all these components, we're going to do a separate video for them. There again, this is the last point. Last part's most important. You got to build your Jeep for your wheeling. All these questions all change the answer for your purpose.
You know how I
of a
tell
build.
customers that come in and want to build I want to build a Jeep on tons and 40s. Okay. Are you sure? That's question one. Yeah. Okay, cool. So I tell them, I say, we're done today. We'll meet again next week. I need you to go home, sit in your favorite chair with whatever your favorite beverage is, and think what this is. We're here, right? We're getting started. I need to know what this is. Let's get back on camera here. Because we don't go from here to here in 7 or 8 steps. We can, and we do.
But
it's your wallet.
Like I said,
just be
last part,
brutally honest.
Think about it.
It's your money.
Yeah.
I'll gladly spend it.
Yep.
It's not a problem. But start here.
Help this person up front.
And there. Right? So what is here?
I gotta help this.
That's what I said. Favorite chair, favorite beverage, whatever that is. Dream, I'm going to show my age. Dream in HD. I think we're up to what, 8K now? I don't know. 4K, 8K, Ultra, something, whatever. Dream in that. Not black and white, not color. The good stuff. 4K, 8K, whatever the hell that is. And really think about what you want here. Then we can build a plan. We can take you from here, which is bone stock, to there in one shot. Yeah, what's your end goal? In one shot. Yeah, that bill's ugly. I ain't gonna bullshit. That could be $100,000. That could be $150,000. But if you start here and go there and go there and go there.
Sorry, I'm back.
And then maybe deviate over there to get back over here to get there. I guarantee you can add a lot more to that $100,000. Do it once.
$100,000.
Or whatever that budget is. It could be $10,000, could be $5,000, could be $2,000.
Right.
But if you go from here to there to here to there to back, do all these, we call it inchitis. You know, oh yeah, Bob, all I really want is 33s. 33s are going to be perfect. And then 6 weeks later, you're in the shop and you want 35s. Then you want 37s. Then you go, fuck it, I'm just going to 40s.
Okay.
And so figure out what this is, start here, figure out what that is, and do it one shot.
Okay. We need to end. We're going to go develop some of these others into smaller videos so you guys don't have to watch the whole 30-minute live. You can watch little chunks of it.
30-minute lives are right.
And there's another debate for off screen. So We'll catch you guys next Tuesday. We will be tuning in with a superstar next week. Hopefully,
I'm
she
already
agrees
here.
to what I wanted to.
What do you want to know?
Lordy. Oh, Lordy. And I'll try to keep Bob under wraps for the next week. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great week.